These frames were captured almost a century ago. Einstein and his wife make their entrance into the USA, greeted by a throng of journalists from prominent American media outlets. The scientist's visit is nothing short of sensational. Music? They inquired. What does the theory of relativity mean? Just kidding, naturally. The reporter actually asked about Einstein's views on prohibition. However, he responded by saying he doesn't drink at all. Thus, the question missed the mark, and this moment holds more importance than it appears at first blush. By that time, Einstein had transitioned from being a scientist to a full-fledged celebrity. For the next century, people would recognize him for his high IQ, untamed hairstyle, and easygoing demeanor. He was known as the mind behind the theory of relativity and a contributor to the atomic bomb. While Einstein's popularity is unquestionable, the magnitude of his scientific contributions has been debated by both esteemed scientists and anonymous internet users alike. The assertions are as follows. In mathematics, young Albert struggled and did not gain admission to university on his first try. Everything is relative, a profound thought, yet it leans more towards philosophy than physics. In reality, this idea is clear even to a fifth grader. The continued prevalence of Einstein's portrait somewhat highlights the artificial inflation of his stature. In contrast, Newton fundamentally established the principles of classical physics. He did not gain admission to university on his first attempt. Everything is relative, a significant insight, although it pertains more to philosophy than physics. In fact, this concept is clear even to a fifth grader. The enduring presence of Einstein's portrait reinforces the notion that his fame has been artificially exaggerated. In contrast, while Newton fundamentally established classical physics, he doesn't appear on t-shirts. Well, this will be an extensive and engaging video. Myths will be dispelled, doubts eliminated, and questions answered. What can be stated at this moment is that Albert Einstein was a polarizing figure. He was a scientist who believed in God, a pacifist who played a role in developing the atomic bomb, and a physicist who favored imagination over equations. Ultimately, he was a man who dared to challenge the universe. Music. All right, an important disclaimer. I'm not sure what comes next, whether it's physics pulling away from me or me from physics, but both are reaching for infinity. Are there more knowledgeable individuals who could create a video about Einstein? Certainly. And does that concern me? Not in the least. And here's why. The central question surrounding Einstein's legacy, whether he is a genius, whether he advanced science or hindered it, is this. It mirrors a typical 18th century landscape, featuring the sky, trees, and a river. It's beautiful and, most importantly, straightforward. This contrasts sharply with a painting by Wassily Kandinsky from the early 20th century. It's unclear. Consequently, it becomes challenging to determine whether it is beautiful or not. This is why the primary question surrounding Einstein's legacy, whether he is a genius or whether he advanced science or hindered it, can be illustrated as follows. It resembles a typical 18th century landscape, complete with the sky, trees, and a river. It's beautiful and, most importantly, clear. In contrast, consider a painting by Wassily Kandinsky from the early 20th century. It is ambiguous. Therefore, it becomes challenging to determine whether it can be deemed beautiful or not. Around 100 years ago, a similar scenario unfolded not just in the realm of art, but also in science. It began to advance so swiftly that the average individual could no longer grasp it. From Newton's era until approximately the end of the 19th century, a person with a solid foundational education typically had an understanding of the developments in modern physics, chemistry, and astronomy. By the early 20th century, science had accelerated too rapidly, complicating the task of determining whether Einstein was a genius or an over-exaggerated charlatan. However, challenging doesn't imply impossible, and there's no need to worry. A doctoral degree won't be required. Furthermore, physics is far from the only subject I'll cover. Einstein experienced 2 world wars, led a vibrant personal life, and could very well have become a reality show star had such an opportunity been available in the 1930s. Let's view this video as a concise guide on how to become the most renowned scientist in human history. To determine whether Einstein is a genius or a fraud, it's essential to understand how science functions and what it was like during periods of acclaim. He led a vibrant personal life and might have easily become a reality show star had such an opportunity been available in the 1930s. Let's regard this video as a succinct guide on how to become the most famous scientist in human history. To ascertain whether Einstein is a genius or a fraud, understanding how science operates is essential. This knowledge proves valuable, especially during eras when conspiracy theories and schemes gain traction. Initially, an observation takes place. A notable example is the discovery of penicillin. In 1928, British microbiologist Alexander Fleming observed something peculiar in the lab. Petri dishes that had been left with Staphylococcus bacteria for an experiment. However, after a few days of the scientist's absence, the bacteria perished. The cause was mold that had inadvertently entered the dish. Fleming proposed a hypothesis. There is a substance in the mold that annihilates bacteria. He performed experiments, isolated this substance, detailed its properties, and engaged other scientists in the process. They assisted in purifying penicillin, validating its effectiveness, and years later, the world saw the advent of the first antibiotic, which would save millions of lives. Science is fundamentally based on experiments and evidence. This principle is particularly crucial in the fields of medicine and public health. Unfortunately, not all doctors today stay abreast of current medical knowledge, which can lead to the recommendation of treatment methods that became obsolete decades ago, or that were never proven effective in clinical practice. Doctors operate according to the principles of evidence-based medicine. This means that they make decisions regarding medicine and public health. Unfortunately, not all doctors today are up to date with the latest medical knowledge, which may result in the recommendation of treatment methods that became outdated decades ago, or that were never effective in clinical practice. In evidence-based medicine, doctors adhere to the principles of evidence-based practice. This implies that their decisions are grounded in current scientific knowledge. Consequently, patients receive only those diagnostic, preventive, and treatment methods that have demonstrated both safety and effectiveness. One can invest years in treating migraines and other ailments, spending substantial amounts of money while receiving lackluster care from doctors and ineffective treatments. In evidence-based medicine, unnecessary and expensive, heavily marketed medications will not be prescribed, nor will patients be referred for unnecessary tests. Moreover, the initial consultation typically lasts around 40 minutes, compared to the usual 15 minutes at a clinic. Let's be truthful. Visiting the doctor can be somewhat stressful for both children and adults. In a clinic that prioritizes evidence-based medicine, the environment is designed to be as welcoming as possible for kids, featuring a slide in place of stairs and rewards for bravery. For adults, there's no requirement for shoe covers. No one will reprimand or intimidate. Fostering respectful relationships between doctors and patients is a vital principle of evidence-based medicine. I will provide a link to the evidence-based medicine clinic and the children's clinic in the description below the video. You will also find the promo code LOGANOFF there. For children, there's a slide instead of stairs and gifts for bravery, while adults enjoy the convenience of not needing shoe covers. No one will scold or intimidate you. Fostering respectful relationships between doctors and patients is a fundamental principle of evidence-based medicine. I will include links to the DocMed and DocKids clinics in the description below the video. There, you'll also find the promo code LOGANOFF. By using it, you'll receive a 50% discount on your first visit until the end of the year. Einstein was not born as we know him. In his early years, his parents had no inkling they were nurturing a future genius. In fact, the boy faced difficulties learning to speak. Worried about his development, his parents even sought the advice of a doctor. They were apprehensive that Albert might never fully grasp language. The maid described the child as slow, and I suspect that in German, this label came across as even more severe. Over time, the boy learned to speak, although he did so later than his classmates. For many years, before voicing anything, he would softly repeat phrases to himself. However, this deficiency may have evolved into Einstein's superpower. Firstly, he thought in images instead of words, a trait that would later underpin his scientific method. Secondly, Albert had been posing unexpected questions since he was a child, questions that seemed obvious and clear to everyone else. Both of Einstein's parents descended from Jewish merchants who resided in southern Germany. Several centuries of this heritage led them to consider themselves more German than Jewish. Thinking in images would later serve as the cornerstone of his scientific method. Additionally, Albert had been raising unexpected questions since childhood, questions that appeared obvious and clear to everyone else. Both of Einstein's parents were descendants of Jewish merchants from southern Germany. Centuries of this heritage led them to identify themselves as more German than Jewish. Yet it was exactly his nationality that barred Albert's father, Hermann Einstein, from pursuing higher education. He spent his entire life engaged in business, albeit not very successfully, as he was a gentle person, leaving the family in modest circumstances. In contrast, the future scientist's mother, Pauline, possessed a strong-willed character and had the ability to sharply provoke those around her, a trait that undoubtedly carried over to her son and caused him significant issues in adulthood. Initially, The parents planned to name their firstborn Abraham, but later opted for something less Jewish. As a result, Albert Einstein was born in 1879, a modest and unsociable child. Those who recalled his early years described the future genius in this way. Albert's parents were so non-religious that they first enrolled him in a Catholic school, simply because it was closer to home. This is particularly amusing, given that Albert Einstein nearly became the president of Israel, but we'll discuss that later. For now, we want to highlight another fact about the genius's school years. In dozens, if not hundreds, non-religious Jews. They first enrolled the boy in a Catholic school, as it was simply closer to home. This is especially amusing, given that Albert Einstein nearly served as the president of Israel. But we'll touch on that later. Right now, we want to focus on another aspect of the genius's school years. On dozens, if not hundreds of websites, one might come across the claim that Einstein failed mathematics in school. This serves as a glimmer of hope for those who also struggled with sines, cosines, and logarithms. Unfortunately, folks, this is merely a myth. In reality, the situation was quite the opposite. Einstein's secondary school emphasized mathematics, and he excelled in the subject compared to his classmates. In short, it's unclear how this myth came to be. Einstein himself often laughed about it, stating that even at 15, he understood differential and integral calculus. It gives the impression of someone lacking knowledge on the topic, while sounding quite intelligent. It was during secondary school that Albert's character began to exhibit signs of independent thinking and a rebellion against authority. This frequently resulted in conflicts with his teachers. After one such incident, one of the instructors informed Einstein that he would never amount to anything. In the mid-1890s, Hermann Einstein's business went bankrupt. He had been involved in the electrification of cities, and after failing to secure another government contract, decided to relocate his family to. This frequently resulted in clashes with his teachers. Following one such incident, an instructor remarked to Einstein that he would never achieve anything. In the mid-1890s, Hermann Einstein's company went bankrupt. He was engaged in the electrification of cities, and after not being able to obtain another government contract, chose to relocate with his family to Italy, where he believed competition would be less fierce. 16-year-old Albert stayed behind with acquaintances in Munich. With just 1 year until graduation, he wouldn't be Einstein if he didn't have a fallout with his teachers and depart to join his parents in Italy 6 months before completing his studies. The reason may stem from the extensive rote memorization that Einstein despised with all his heart. It could also relate to the German inclination toward systematization and order, which contrasted with Albert's personality. Alternatively, it might have been Einstein's refusal to enlist in the army at 17, as mandated by German law. It's challenging to envision two pursuits more disparate than studying and military service. A few years after gaining Swiss citizenship, he would still be required to serve. However, he was considered unfit due to flat feet and excessive sweating. Nevertheless, Einstein's motivations for rejecting military service extended beyond physical concerns. They were profoundly mental. This will be revisited multiple times throughout the video. For now, let's concentrate on the fact that Einstein military service. A few years after acquiring Swiss citizenship, he was still required to serve, but was classified as unfit due to flat feet and excessive sweating. However, Einstein's rejection of military service stemmed far more from mental than physical reasons. This theme will recur several times throughout the video. For now, let's highlight that Einstein fled to Italy and independently prepared for university admission. Music. Albert Einstein, taking flight from Zurich, which at that time was neither the leading university in Europe nor the top institution in Switzerland, and not even the best university in Zurich, was unable to gain admission there. Opponents of Einstein could certainly exploit this fact to their advantage. However, this is only part of the whole truth. Firstly, Albert did not pass the entrance exams in the humanities, particularly in language. However, he excelled in the exams for mathematics and other exact sciences. Secondly, Einstein was accepted into the university on his second attempt. Lastly, the Polytechnic Institute of Zurich was, in fact, a highly respected educational institution, and gaining admission there was no easy feat. In 1896, Einstein commenced his studies at the university. By then, Albert had already become a stateless individual, having renounced his German citizenship due to his rejection of Prussian ways of life. It would be several years before he obtained a Swiss passport. Throughout this period, Einstein essentially lived and studied in relative peace. A respected educational institution. Gaining admission, there was no simple task. In 1896, Einstein began his university studies. By that time, Albert had already become a stateless individual, having renounced his German citizenship due to his rejection of Prussian ways of life. It would take a few years before he acquired a Swiss passport. During this entire period, Einstein essentially lived and studied in peace, without being a citizen of any nation. One of the many quotes from the renowned scientist was, "Blind reverence for authority is the greatest enemy of truth." While he deviated from this principle later in life, during his studies at the Polytechnic, he upheld it wholeheartedly. Professor Weider taught physics at the Polytechnic Institute of Zurich, and young student Einstein thoroughly enjoyed his lectures, attending them without fail at first. However, as time passed, it became evident that Weider's course did not address relatively recent discoveries, particularly Maxwell's equations. These equations describe the speed of light, affirming that it remains constant at approximately 300,000 kilometers per second. Einstein had examined Maxwell's works back in school, which troubled him. He imagined various scenarios and pondered, what if I were to travel alongside a light wave at a speed of 300,000 kilometers per second? Would it then appear to be frozen? It's not surprising that the omission of such a crucial topic from the university curriculum created significant confusion for the future genius. In school, these concepts troubled him. He envisioned scenarios and wondered, what if I were to travel next to a light wave at a speed of 300,000 kilometers per second? Would it then appear to be frozen? It's no surprise that the lack of such an important topic in the university curriculum led to significant confusion for the future genius. Conflicts with the instructor escalated to the point where the young student started referring to him as Herr Weber instead of the respectful Professor Herb. One day, Following yet another disagreement, Einstein received a reprimand, which felt especially humiliating given that the university's grading scale was out of 6 points. In short, one could confidently describe the young student Albert Einstein as bold and sharp-tongued. Another significant conflict for the future genius arose with the mathematics instructor. The cause was straightforward. Professor Minkowski often noticed that student Einstein was absent from many of his lectures, as he tended to skip them and later copied notes from a friend. This led Professor Minkowski to nickname Albert Lazy Dog. Einstein's specialty was theoretical physics, a discipline that was just beginning to emerge as an independent science in the 1890s. Albert's true nature as a theorist was evident in his lab failures. During one experiment, the equipment exploded, resulting in serious injuries for Einstein. The experiments that brought real success to Einstein occurred within his mind, where he could explore the cosmos without any physical pain. In the 1890s, physics was just beginning to solidify its status as an independent science. Albert's identity as a theorist was demonstrated by his lab failures. During one experiment, the equipment exploded, causing serious injuries to Einstein. The most successful experiments for him happened within his mind, where he could dissect cosmic space without pain, whether while in an elevator or racing on a train at the speed of light. These visual experiments would later contribute to the development of the theory of relativity and other breakthroughs of genius. But those achievements would come later. In 1900, despite his absences and conflicts with professors, Einstein graduated successfully from the Polytechnic Institute of Zurich, achieving an average grade of 5, 7 out of a possible 6 points. He received his diploma and was eligible to apply for a position as a professor's assistant at the university. Einstein dispatched resumes throughout Europe. While a small number of letters received rejections, the majority went unanswered. Some resumes Albert sent twice, but to no avail. The main reason was likely his character. For instance, he would sometimes include a critical remark about a professor's scientific work in his resume while trying to secure a job with that same professor. The idea, of course, was quite weak. The young graduate also believed that his former professors from the Polytechnic were conspiring against him by providing negative recommendations. Given Albert's temperament, this was hardly surprising. Einstein's emotional intelligence clearly fell short of including a critical remark about a professor's scientific work in his resume while attempting to secure a job was, of course, a rather poor idea. The young graduate also believed that his former professors from the Polytechnic were scheming against him by providing unfavorable recommendations. Considering Albert's character, this was hardly surprising. Einstein's emotional intelligence clearly fell short. After a year of unsuccessful job hunting, he felt disheartened. Occasional tutoring gigs provided barely enough to make ends meet. There are moments when a seemingly minor life choice by an individual can alter the course of history. At the start of the 20th century, Albert Einstein made such a choice. He could have left science to work as an engineer in his father's company in Italian Malata. Einstein would surely have become a competent engineer, if not a genius, but he opted for science instead. Another year went by, and a university friend of Albert's assisted him in securing a job at a patent office in Bern, Switzerland. The position of third-class expert was the lowest rank available. To advance to a higher position, one needed to have a doctoral degree, but several of Einstein's applications for a doctorate had been denied by the Polytechnic. It might seem that a low position at the patent office would dishearten a recent graduate eager to pursue science. However, Einstein was pleased with the offer. The job hunt had worn him out, and moreover, the salary. To progress to a higher position, one needed to defend a doctoral degree, but several of Einstein's applications for a doctorate had been turned down by the Polytechnic. It may appear that a low position at the patent office would disappoint a recent graduate eager to pursue science. However, Einstein was content with the offer. The job search had drained him, and additionally, the salary of a junior clerk was considerably higher than that of a professor's assistant. Most importantly, Einstein could continue writing his scientific papers during his free time, and sometimes even in the midst of the workday. He had the freedom to do this without needing to take into account the conservative scientific community he would have faced as a university assistant. He worked at the patent office for 7 years, putting in 8 hours a day, 6 days a week. Those 7 years turned out to be the most productive of his creative journey, as all of the genius's significant discoveries were made during that period. Therefore, a 5-day work week in the office was not a burden, but simply an opportunity. 1905. The young patent expert writes a letter to his friend Conrad. No one could have predicted that these few casually written pages would become one of the most significant documents not only in the history of physics, but in science as a whole. Einstein addresses his friend as a frozen whale, chastising him for having left, and a year later, the young patent expert sends another letter to his friend Conrad. No one could have envisioned that these few pages, penned in a casual tone, would turn into one of the most crucial documents not only in the history of physics, but in science overall. Einstein calls his friend a frozen whale, criticizing him for leaving, and then shares several ideas he is developing. In general, picture a scenario where a friend sends you a message in a chat, and 10 years later, that message wins a Nobel Prize. The situation with Einstein's letter was somewhat akin to this. So, what made this letter so extraordinary? The first page included a theory about quanta, asserting that light is not merely a continuous wave, as was previously thought, but also a flow of tiny particles known as quanta. For those not well versed in physics, this may not seem particularly impressive, but in truth, this discovery revolutionized scientists' understanding of the universe. It was for this work that Einstein ultimately received the Nobel Prize, rather than for the theory of relativity. The second page presented a study on measuring the true sizes of atoms. For perspective, at that time, not all scientists acknowledged the very existence of atoms. The third page included research examining the movement of microscopic particles within a fluid. The fourth page offered a draft of a paper focused on the electrodynamics of moving bodies. On the second page, there was a study on accurately determining the sizes of atoms. To provide some context, not all scientists at that time accepted the very existence of atoms. The third page included a study examining the movement of microscopic particles in a fluid. The fourth page presented a draft of a paper on the electrodynamics of moving bodies, which would ultimately evolve into the special theory of relativity, redefining Newtonian concepts of space and time. This very fourth work would later give rise to the most famous equation in the history of physics: the equivalence of energy and mass multiplied by the speed of light squared. I'm certain that not everyone grasped the ideas and terms I've mentioned. Don't be concerned. First of all, at the start of the 20th century, even many distinguished scientists struggled to comprehend the discussions. Furthermore, I will clarify everything in simple terms shortly. What you should understand for now is that 1905 was an extraordinary year. 365 days in the life of a genius, which would eventually be referred to as the Year of Wonders. In a single year, Einstein published 4 articles in a scientific journal. These theories, originating from the letter to Conrad, would later revolutionize the scientific community and earn Einstein the title of music. A significant source for creating this video was Einstein's letters. He corresponded with colleagues, friends, and lovers, engaging in discussions about science with. In just 1 year, Einstein released 4 articles in a scientific journal. These theories, stemming from his letter to Conrad, would eventually shake the scientific community and earn Einstein a title. A key resource for producing this video was Einstein's letters. He communicated with colleagues, friends, and lovers, discussing scientific matters with each of them. Theories and hypotheses needed feedback, as science, much like art and business, is not conducted in isolation. It thrives on dynamic communication. However, distances, time zones, and global viruses can keep people apart. Einstein had no option but to write letters. In contrast, today we can utilize convenient and secure services for online meetings and conferences, such as Spare Jazz. I would like to share my own experience. At one point, I was no longer the sole creator of videos for the channel, which brought up the need for fast and easy communication. For me, the primary requirement when using any service is convenience and ease of use. Being a creative individual with a humanitarian background, I need something that allows me to press just 2 buttons for it to function effectively. Spur Jazz is precisely that solution. You can download the app on your phone or computer or access it through a browser. In just a few clicks, you can invite friends, colleagues, or family members to start communicating. The service offers a public version that is ideal for personal use. A platform where you can simply press 2 buttons and it operates smoothly. Spare Jazz is just that. You can download the app on your phone or computer or access it via a browser. With just a few clicks, you can invite friends, colleagues, or family members to begin communicating. The service includes a public version that is ideal for personal use. You can invite up to 200 participants and chat without limitations. Spare Jazz boasts a host of excellent features, including noise cancellation, text transcription of conversations, and the ability for multiple users to share screens simultaneously. And naturally, there's a chat with reactions. What would it be without that? The service is suitable for individuals of all ages. Therefore, Spur Jazz is ideal for organizing a grandmother's anniversary as well as for conducting business conferences. Furthermore, the service offers a paid version with enhanced functionality for businesses. This version allows for closed meetings reserved solely for company employees, includes a waiting room, provides access via login and password, and enables management of participants' actions during the conference. I will provide the link to Jazz in the description beneath the video. Feel free to check it out and connect with anyone, anytime. However, if you believe that following the publication of his groundbreaking articles, Einstein was promptly offered a professorship, invited to the Academy of Sciences, or awarded some prize, you are mistaken. Recognition did not arrive immediately. He continued to work at the Patent Office for an additional 4 years. Feel free to explore and connect with anyone at any time. However, if you think that after publishing his groundbreaking articles, Einstein was instantly offered a professorship, invited to the Academy of Sciences, or awarded some prize, you are mistaken. Acknowledgement did not come immediately. He continued working at the Patent Office for another 4 years. His personal life during that period was just as noteworthy as his scientific endeavors. However, it was often difficult to discern where one aspect began and the other ended. By 1905, when Einstein was 26 years old, he had already married and become a father twice. His wife was Mileva Maric. She was not only his spouse, but also a collaborator in his scientific work. They studied together at the Polytechnic Institute of Zurich. While getting into the university was a notable accomplishment for Albert, for Mileva, it represented a major achievement. Maric was raised in Serbia. Her passion for mathematics and physics emerged early on, leading her to embark on a difficult journey in the harsh, male-dominated realm of the exact sciences. Her parents had no connection to science. Mileva attended several schools, progressively advancing to more prestigious institutions, eventually ending up at the boys' gymnasium in Zagreb. There, she was not only the top student, but also the only girl. Due to a childhood illness, Mileva Maric walked with a limp, and few regarded. Mileva's journey was arduous in the unforgiving, male-dominated sphere of the exact sciences. Her parents had no connections to science. She attended multiple schools, gradually progressing to more prestigious institutions, finally landing at the boys' gymnasium in Zagreb. There, she excelled as the top student while being the only girl. As a result of a childhood illness, Mileva Maric walked with a limp, and few saw her as beautiful, at least by traditional standards. Einstein's romance with Mileva during their second year at the Polytechnic Institute took both his friends and parents by surprise. At that time, he was involved with a kind and charming girl named Mari, who knew Einstein's family in Switzerland. Many of Albert's relatives viewed Mari as his future wife, and she believed that to be true as well. However, with Einstein studying in Zurich while she resided in another city, it appeared that their long-distance relationship was struggling. Even a century ago, Mileva Maric was the ideal girlfriend for Einstein. Firstly, he did not align with the views of those around him and found her incredibly attractive. Their personal correspondence from that time includes many clear allusions. For instance, Einstein wrote to her, "We understand the darker aspects of our souls so well, and we delight in devouring sausages, drinking coffee, and spending time together." I'm certain that if emojis had been available then, Einstein would have ended half of his letters to Mileva with a peach emoji. Their correspondence from that time is filled with clear implications. For instance, Einstein wrote to her, "We understand the darker sides of our souls so well, and we enjoy devouring sausages, drinking coffee, and engaging in other activities together. I am certain that if emojis had existed back then, Einstein would have signed half of his letters to Mileva with images of a peach and an eggplant." The second reason for their tumultuous romance was their shared passion for science. In their letters and during their meetings, they passionately debated and discussed physics. Both of their parents opposed their relationship, especially any thoughts of marriage. Nevertheless, a year after university graduation, she found herself pregnant. At that time, she was preparing to retake her exams after having failed them previously, which prevented her from graduating from the Polytechnic Institute alongside Albert. They were cohabiting at that moment. Einstein was struggling to find a job, but they managed to pass the exams on their second attempt. In the final months of her pregnancy, she went to live with her parents in Serbia. Her academic career came to an end. The mystery surrounding Albert Einstein's first child remains unsolved even today. The existence of his first daughter was only uncovered relatively recently. In Serbia, Mileva gave birth to a girl who likely died young from scarlet fever. Another possibility is that Mileva put the child up for adoption and went to reunite with her husband in Zurich. Regardless of the circumstance, Albert Einstein did not. The existence of his first daughter was uncovered only fairly recently. In Serbia, Mileva gave birth to a girl who most likely succumbed to scarlet fever at a very young age. Another possibility is that Mileva gave the child up for adoption before traveling to reunite with her husband in Zurich. In any case, Albert Einstein was not present at the birth and likely never saw his first daughter throughout his life. Einstein was a theoretical physicist, and the episode involving his first child, along with his later relationships with his two sons, indicates that his affection for them was somewhat abstract as well. Albert was far more intrigued by humanity as a whole than by individual people, including those closest to him. In that same year, 1902, Albert's father passed away. On his deathbed, he granted his approval for Albert to marry Marich. A year later, Albert and Mileva had a modest wedding in the presence of a few friends. A year after that, they welcomed their son Hans. It was during this time that Einstein's marriage began to deteriorate. However, it would be several more years until their separation and decades until the formal divorce. Marich remained dedicated to science. She aspired to be an equal partner in her husband's work. They would discuss his ideas, perform calculations late into the night, and formulate hypotheses together. However, after the birth of their son, Albert anticipated that Mileva would assume the main responsibility for their child. Marich held a different viewpoint, and this was especially apparent. For decades prior to the official divorce, Marich remained devoted to science, hoping to be an equal partner in her husband's work. They would discuss his ideas, conduct calculations late at night, and develop hypotheses together. However, following the birth of their son, Albert expected Mileva to take on the primary responsibility for childcare. Marich had a differing perspective. The incident concerning the publication of Einstein's scientific papers in 1905 was notably shocking. At the conclusion, he acknowledged a university friend who had assisted him in his work, yet he failed to mention Mileva. This undoubtedly had a profound impact on her. Whether this was fair is a different matter. Indeed, she supported Einstein primarily by handling the mathematical calculations for his physical theories. Objectively speaking, this did not amount to a complete contribution to the scientific works and did not introduce anything new to the theories. Conversely, throughout those years, Einstein often shared his ideas with Marich. She supported him, and when examining Mileva's biography, one can grasp her emotions. Her husband was pursuing the professional dream she had envisioned while she was occupied with changing diapers. In 1910, the couple had their second son, Edouard. However, rather than saving the marriage, this event had the opposite effect. By that time, Albert Einstein had finally gained recognition from the scientific community. We will soon delve into the specifics of his contributions. Einstein was offered a position at the Academy of Sciences in Germany, along with a professorship at the University of Berlin. The couple welcomed their second son, Edouard. However, instead of saving their marriage, this event actually worsened the situation. By that point, Albert Einstein had finally received recognition from the scientific community. We will soon explore the details of his contributions. Soon after, Einstein was offered a position at the Academy of Sciences in Germany, as well as a professorship at the University of Berlin. Mileva Marich struggled with depression, and there was a history of schizophrenia in her family. This would later have an impact on their second son, Edouard. Albert's relationship with Mileva continued to decline, signaling the definite end of her career. He increasingly immersed himself in his work. There, he felt at home. It was an escape from all the troubles of life. Eventually, Mileva discovered her husband's affair. His mistress was Elsa Löwenthal, who, in addition to being his lover, was also a relative. Though not closely related, she was nonetheless family. Elsa's father was a cousin, and she was a divorced mother of 2 children. She was of the same age as Mileva, perhaps the only aspect that linked the 2 women. Elsa lacked knowledge of physics. However, it was her warmth and nurturing nature that truly defined her. This was precisely what Albert Einstein craved during his failing marriage. By 1914, Mileva Marich had become aware of her husband's affair. Einstein was also conscious of Mileva's own liaison, yet neither was prepared to take a definitive step toward resolution. Indeed, it was her warmth and nurturing demeanor that truly defined her. This was precisely what Albert Einstein sought during his disintegrating marriage. By 1914, Mileva Marich had become aware of her husband's affair. Einstein was also cognizant of Mileva's own relationship, yet neither was prepared for a final divorce. Einstein suggested a compromise to Mileva, a stringent contract that effectively transformed their marriage into a mere facade, while still permitting communication with the children. According to the contract's terms, Marich was required to take on all household responsibilities, leave the room at her husband's first request, and naturally, the agreement barred any form of intimate relations. Initially, Marich agreed to the contract. However, after a few months, she took the children and relocated to Zurich. A close friend of Einstein later noted that on that day he witnessed Albert in tears, almost a rare occurrence in his life. The official divorce would not take place until 5 years later. Einstein, recognizing that he was dealing with a scientifically knowledgeable woman, proposed a unique arrangement, a divorce in exchange for the Nobel Prize. At the time of this agreement, Albert had not yet received the award, but he was certain he would earn it in the coming years. The prize included a considerable financial reward, which Albert intended to give to Mileva Maric, fully aware of the importance of her husband's discoveries. She accepted the proposal. A woman well-versed in science proposed a unique arrangement, a divorce in return for the Nobel Prize. At the time of the agreement, Albert had not yet won it, but he was confident it would come in the years ahead. The prize also included a significant financial reward, which Albert planned to give to Mileva Maric, fully recognizing the importance of her husband's contributions. Having come to an agreement, he received the Nobel Prize in 1922. With that money, Mileva would acquire several properties in the heart of Zurich. Now, it is time to return once more to the year 1905, to those few scientific papers authored by the 26-year-old Einstein that transformed the course of physics and our comprehension of the universe. The concepts outlined in these papers were so groundbreaking that some distinguished physicists of that era dismissed them, while others could hardly believe that their creator was merely a young clerk from the patent office. I will attempt to explain this as clearly as possible. Clarifying physics is challenging, and I admit I'm not the best at it. Let's begin with the wider context. The early 20th century, science was surging forward at an extraordinary pace. People at that time felt they were at the forefront of scientific discovery, and truly, that was the reality. In 1900, the renowned physicist Kelvin proclaimed, "There is nothing new left in physics, and there is nothing more to discover. We can only make increasingly